Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're unpacking something fascinating called the Trojan Vault paradox. It sits right at the heart of Japan's new JC-STAR grid connection requirements. And it's a classic case of what happens when really good regulatory intentions just kind of crash headfirst into technical reality. To really get to the core of this, ask yourself a question. What happens when a cybersecurity law strictly regulates, say, the exact metallurgical composition of a padlock, but literally completely ignores whether the front door is just left wide open? I mean, it sounds like a bad joke, right? But according to our source material, two major government agencies in Japan have accidentally mandated exactly this. And look, this misalignment isn't just some minor bureaucratic hiccup. It actually dictates the real-world resilience of the power grid you and I rely on every single day. So let's look at how we actually got here. Okay, let's dive into this. By the year 2027, solar power conditioners, often called PCS units, face this brand new requirement in Japan. Basically, they must obtain a JC-STAR Level 1 cybersecurity certification just to connect to the energy grid. Now that sounds perfectly reasonable on paper, for sure. But as our source highlights, there are actually two distinct agencies holding the pen here. On one side, we've got METI, the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, and they're the ones dictating the grid requirements. But on the flip side, we have the IPA, the Information Technology Promotion Agency, who actually runs the JC-STAR certification system itself. And here is where things get really interesting. When we cross-reference the latest official responses from both of these agencies, a fatal logical disconnect totally emerges. See, METI's stance is that devices connected behind certain gateways might actually be exempt, which heavily implies they believe boundary protection, like a firewall, actually matters. But here is the catch. The IPA, the very agency issuing the required level, explicitly states that their JC-STAR certification does not consider boundary protection at all. None. Their evaluation scope is strictly limited to the device itself, completely isolated from its real-world network environment. Our source material calls this the blank space. It's essentially a structural flaw where the regulation's foundational logic assumes that defending the network boundary works, but the actual mandated certification label completely ignores whether that boundary even exists in the first place. Now, I want to be perfectly impartial here, just as our source is. This is absolutely not a flaw in the NIP IPA's label itself. The IPA is being totally honest and technically transparent about the limits of their testing. The contradiction lies entirely in how this isolated device-level label is being blindly applied as the exclusive requirement for grid connection. Okay, so let's move on to the evidence and see how this actually plays out in the real world. Our source material ran a really strict technical analysis to see what happens when we test this exact logic. And what they found creates what they call an inversion structure. To understand this inversion structure, let's set up a really sharp contrast. Picture configuration A. It's an uncertified device, sure, but one that is shielded by proper network architecture. We're talking firewalls, VPNs, multi-factor authentication, separated networks, the whole shebang. Now look at configuration B. This is a device flaunting that shiny new JC-STAR certification label, but it is plugged straight into the internet with open remote access. Under the current draft rules, configuration A, the highly secure one, is completely banned. Meanwhile, configuration B, which is essentially like plugging a certified toaster directly into the Wild West of the internet, is perfectly allowed. Crazy, right? The source relentlessly walks through the data by testing both of these setups against 7 specific attack scenarios. Let's look at the results. Scenario 1, a direct internet intrusion. Well, configuration A blocks it right at the boundary, while B is directly exposed, so A wins. Scenario 2, stolen credentials. A requires a VPN and multi-factor authentication, but B's open pathways just fail. A wins again. What about scenario 3, a supply chain compromise? A limits the blast radius, but B just lets it spread. Even for scenario 6, which is a coordinated mass attack aiming to literally shut down the grid, configuration A's separation makes routing incredibly difficult. But mass-deployed certified products in configuration B, they share one uniform, highly exposed attack surface. Out of all 7 scenarios, that certified but exposed configuration B only clearly wins in scenario 5, which involves botnets brute-forcing default passwords. And you know why? Because that is exactly what the label tests for. Yes, 6. I really want to emphasize this absolute jaw-dropping conclusion from the source. In 6 out of 7 attack scenarios, the well-configured uncertified device vastly outperforms the certified one in defending the grid. By obsessing over the shiny sticker on the device, rather than how the device is actually connected, the rule officially permits highly vulnerable setups while aggressively banning highly secure ones. Now, what's really interesting about this dynamic is how this technical contradiction spills right over into economics. When a technical rule is fundamentally disconnected from actual risk mitigation, it accidentally transforms into a market barrier. Think about it. If you are a manufacturer, you're basically forced to spend time and money chasing a certification that doesn't even fully secure the grid. And if you can't get it, well, you are locked out of the market entirely, completely regardless of how robust your actual field installations are.
The source highlights a list of missing safety valves that really exacerbates this barrier. For instance, core terms like IP communication remain completely undefined. There is also this opaque exceptional application process where the criteria aren't even public. Plus, there is no transparent dispute mechanism for manufacturers who get rejected. And strangely, while wind power gets to use functional equivalency, meaning they can use alternative boundary defenses, solar and battery storage are currently denied this option, with zero public explanation. Without these safety valves, the regulation structurally acts to exclude participants.
Now, to maintain absolute neutrality here, we need to look at exactly what the source concludes. They state, quote, "The current design has a structure that can function as market exclusion disguised as technical review. We do not assert any intent to exclude," end quote. This is a crucial point. The analysis isn't claiming there's some intentional conspiracy or malicious protectionism happening here. No, it is impartially pointing out that when you lack safety valves and clear definitions, a regulation functions structurally as an exclusion device, totally regardless of the good intentions behind it. So what does this all mean? And more importantly, how do we fix it? Well, the source material pivots to a highly constructive solution, shifting the focus away from just checking a product label and instead of regulating the connection pathway itself. They call this alternative model the duty of care. It operates on a really fundamental security principle: never trust the product. Assume any device, certified or not, can eventually be compromised, and you build your grid defense around that unshakable reality. The duty of care model breaks down into practical, verifiable steps based on the size of the installation. First up, network separation. Basically, keeping the power generation network strictly separated from business or public networks. Second, boundary defense. Funneling all external connections through a single protected gateway. Third is directional control, generally allowing only outbound communications and strictly limiting inbound commands. And fourth, update and log management, ensuring systems can be patched and that traffic logs are actually kept for audits. These steps directly address the actual attack pathways, stopping threats long before they even touch the vulnerable device. And this brilliantly illustrates the core difference in philosophy here. Regulating just the device? That's really only a snapshot in time. It's kind of like inspecting a car's brakes once at the factory versus mandating how carefully you drive it on the highway. A certification tells you a device was reasonably secure on the exact day it was tested. But regulating the pathway? That provides dynamic resilience. It protects against unknown future threats, zero-day vulnerabilities, and human error. If a manufacturer is compromised down the road, a regulated pathway ensures the blast radius is actually contained. Now, don't get me wrong, the source absolutely doesn't argue for throwing away the JC-STAR label entirely. They definitely recognize it has immense value in raising the baseline hygiene of these devices. Instead, they propose an elegant, sort of aha moment of a compromise, a hybrid solution utilizing something called deemed compliance. This allows the grid to benefit from both the label and the architectural security of the duty of care. So the crucial point is how this actually works in practice. Deemed compliance essentially means that if a device has the JSTAR label, the grid operator automatically considers certain administrative checklist items, like whether the device forces you to change default passwords, as automatically fulfilled. The label becomes a really helpful administrative shortcut, drastically reducing the paperwork burden. And this is the key takeaway, the label absolutely does not replace the mandatory architectural requirements for boundary defense and network separation. The strategic benefits of this hybrid model are massive. First off, it doesn't halt innovation. New cutting-edge tech can still be deployed as long as the network architecture is secure. Second, it aligns perfectly with international cybersecurity standards like IEC 62443, which constantly preaches defense in depth. Finally, it is entirely fair to all manufacturers, effectively eliminating that accidental market barrier we talked about. Ultimately, why this matters to you is that it ensures a robust, stable power grid that can actually withstand both cyber threats and supply chain politics. Which brings us to the ultimate question posed by this analysis. As this regulation moves forward, policymakers face a very clear choice. Will we secure the label, ensuring everyone checks a box while leaving the front door wide open?
Or will we secure the grid, focusing on the architectural pathways that actually stop real-world cyber attacks? It's a profound question about the true goal of cybersecurity, and it's one that will define the resilience of our energy infrastructure for decades to come. Thank you so much for joining this explainer. Keep questioning and keep learning.